In a short stretch of time from the mid-90s to the early 2000s, a relatively small group of people started playing around with this thing called the World Wide Web. They had the audacity to think they just might change the world. This project introduces you to the OG players from those hallowed days and lets them tell you what it was like and how you should have been there. Episode 10. Today we're talking with Carla Hendra. She's the global CEO of Ogilvy Growth and Innovation. This is going to be an incredible conversation. Ritesh.
Mr. Shannon, how are you, sir? Happy Friday.
I'm not used to seeing you with hair product in.
I know. Well, you started the trend, so I figured, I
did, right?
You do it, I should do it too.
I'll tell you, when my glue breaks, it's
yeah, there you go.
So, well, this is awesome. I'm really excited to talk to Carla.
Too.
She's been an innovator for from probably before when we were. This is super exciting. Yeah. So let's get the housekeeping out of the way quick. If you want to learn more about this crazy show we're doing, go to youshoulda.com. You can see past episodes. You can read transcripts. You can get podcasts if you don't like looking at the beauty that you see on screen right now. So there's all the information you need to know there. Also, if you're watching the show and you leave comments, Ritesh is monitoring those. We can put your comments up on screen so you can heckle, you can ask questions, you can do anything you want. And then finally, this is the big request. We need 150 subscribers on our YouTube channel to get our vanity URL. So please subscribe. You'll learn about new shows. It'll be really exciting. So
I think we're at 115. So we've got about 40 odd to go.
Yeah, 35 to go.
35. So. Come on, there must be 35 people out there. Just the ACOM alumni, for God's sake. I think we're being let down by our ex-colleagues.
Not for nothing, but we're in the we've got the Ogilvy world today. This is your stomping ground. So I'm hoping we can get some subscriptions from the network. Well, with that, I'm excited. Why don't we bring Carla on stage?
Awesome.
Hello.
Hey, Carla.
Very nice to see you.
Good to see you guys, especially with the hair product.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I know it's impressive. Yeah. Well, terrific. I couldn't be more thrilled that you're here. Now, you two are colleagues, so I don't know. I think I might want to lead this because I think it'll give you an opportunity to call Ritesh out if you need to.
Absolutely.
All good.
Awesome. Well, so where we like to begin here is at the beginning, and you've been doing this for a while. I'd love to just hear your story. Like, how did it start for you? I assume you've been in New York for a while, and you were there when all this craziness happened in the mid '90s. So I'd love to just start at the beginning and tell us how you got into this and how it all began for you.
Yeah, I mean, it was a pretty defined moment in time for me because I was working at Gray Direct, which was a direct marketing database marketing firm, and I ran the largest business there, which was the Chase bank cards account. So it was heavy, acquisition, retention, usage, all of the sort of classic database marketing applications. And so I went to a lot of financial services conferences to see what was going on. And one time I think it was 1993, I went to a conference and it was billed as financial services, but the strange thing was that there was all these new companies there I'd never really heard of. You used to go and you'd see certainly all of the people that did processing for credit cards and, back end stuff that you didn't usually see every day. But this time there was companies like eTrust and Marimba, who I don't even know if I'm sure they were acquired by someone. And there was all these enabling technologies for the internet. And so I kind of walked in the door of that meeting feeling like I was a financial services marketer. And I walked out feeling, I have to become a technologist of at least to some degree, because now financial services is technology. And so we might call it fintech today, but that wasn't what it was called then. And so I went back to the office, started working with a couple of the people who, were sort of more leading edge. And we started to use it really for marketing purposes. I think we sort of were self-loathing a little bit then and called it Brochureware, but really just websites that told
Yeah.
a story about the products and services, because there was not a lot of ability to do deep functionality yet.
Right.
But quite quickly, the credit card business certainly, and really any financial services, went from being able to do, a few years later, to be able to do applications online and approvals online, and to sell, cross-sell and upsell, and lower the cost of acquisition and of servicing a customer. That was always the potential of the web. It just took some time for that to get there. And like people who were born, like my kids, who grew up with the internet, they would think I was being incredibly weird talking about, what do you mean you couldn't apply for stuff online before? But there was a time. And so at the time, Gray also had a group called Gray Interactive that was started by Norman Lahoulier, one of the other pioneers. And it was just a great way to get started. But I would say, it was sort of the internet was there, but it was sort of the pre-adoption sort of years, maybe those first few, and really it was only the businesses that depended on and were familiar with technology for other reasons that sort of got early adoption. And then I moved to, I got recruited to go to IBM at Ogilvy, and it was after the biggest consolidation in advertising history. And
right, I remember that.
So I get this call, and I go and I interview with the incredible Steve Hayden, who's running something called Team Blue, which is this big global integrated business serving all of IBM brand and marketing services. And those guys at that time spent $1 billion on marketing. And so at my interview, Steve said, you'd think for $1 billion we could sell some stuff. They were making incredible TV commercials and incredible different ads and lots of other stuff, but he needed someone who would come in and drive digital, drive search, or create search in some ways, drive all the new ways that we could do demand generation. And you'd think, again, that IBM was on the cutting edge, but most of the biggest tech companies, I think everyone knows, like Bill Gates said, "Oh, we missed the internet," and Microsoft, until he said, "Embrace and extend the internet." That was not the strategy at Microsoft. And similarly, because IBM sold so much gear, they sold infrastructure, they sold tons of software, but it was mission critical industrial strength software, wasn't consumer software. And so, we developed at the time this huge campaign called eBusiness that explained to the whole world what was happening, what was coming. It was one of the most exciting things I ever worked on. And for the first time ever, a ton of the work, the creative work and the marketing in the market was done through digital channels. And even though they were early days, there was still quite a bit that we could do. So it was a big integrated effort. And I think, in those early,
Carla, were you in IBM, or was this an agent? This was Ogilvy.
I was recruited to Ogilvy. Steve Hayden was
Ogilvy,
head of
the IBM business. Okay.
Of the Ogilvy. Yeah.
Got it.
So the big consolidation had happened a few years earlier for advertising, led by Shelley Lazarus and Lou Gerstner, and reported in the Wall Street Journal and New York Times as an above the fold
big deal.
It was a huge story. And I had done some technology marketing, had done some digital already, but it was still earliest of days. So one of the things that we did was to grow the digital business on the back of this huge client, IBM. And so very quickly we formed an internet committee. That was an old term also that, and I did that with the then CEO of OgilvyOne globally. And he and I started getting the hub markets aligned. We started either building capability in the global markets or buying companies. And pretty soon we had a network that could serve the multinationals that were really the bread and butter of Ogilvy. And so one of the things we did was we had a little media group in OgilvyOne that had done a lot of direct marketing, in sort of direct mail and things like that. Few people there really hopped onto the idea of search and of being able to serve ads on the internet. And Jeff Minsky, Susan Schieckhofer, they were on my team. And with that, we sort of built a digital media group. And then the person who ran all of IBM Media, Nazreen Madhani, came down from Toronto and she was a general media expert, global expert. And she just jumped onto the digital bandwagon and built it eventually into what became Neo at Ogilvy, which is now part of Group M. So, it was just making some of those decisions early to participate and then to innovate and do a couple of things that other people weren't doing yet.
But what's interesting here, Carla, in listening to you is in those early days, I was with Kyle and team at agency.com. There was Razorfish, there was iXL. These little companies were starting up. But you guys at Ogilvy, I remember being at one meeting where it was 3 of us from agency and about 50 Ogilvy interactive people. So you scaled very, very quickly early on while we were still struggling along and doing innovative things, but we were still growing slowly. How did that come?
I mean, that was the beauty of having the consolidated IBM business, because when I came in, Steve had hired just these brilliant leaders for each of the main business units of IBM. So there was, software, servers, global services, eventually the brand business. And they were wonderful brand advertising people. But like everyone at the time, didn't really know anything about digital. Yeah. So I went, in the first 3 months I was at Ogilvy, I hired 100 people for IBM. Wow. And because I could see that we didn't have the right kind of people yet. They hardly existed in the world. And so I went and found somebody pretty senior to partner with each of the IBM team. And then because we had access to the top clients, they all just kept going in and saying, here's what we should do to reach your target market. Oh, your target market's software developers? Yeah, they happen to know about the web already.
Yeah, so on the internet. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, we made some hilarious commercials about why they had to be on the internet and stuff like that. But we also started to do, demand generation programs. And of course, at that time, lots and lots of banner ads and thing and search. I mean, one of the best things we did was Neo had the idea to buy the word Microsoft as a search term for IBM. When you could still do that, you can't do it anymore. No. So like in 1997, anytime anybody in the world, we did a global Yahoo buy, the first one ever. And anybody put in Microsoft, they got served an IBM ad about e-business.
I love it.
It was hilarious. And we had a review with Lou Gerstner that year. One day a year, he would come in and see what we were doing. And the first time he came in, I had to do the digital review, and he didn't know what a click was. So my life passed before my eyes, and I was like, oh my God, how am I going to explain to this? And he was very nice about it. But the next time he came, he knew everything. I mean, he knew more than all of us about digital. And I mean, I'm sure he had a few great teachers from the R&D lab at IBM. Yeah. But anyway, it was very amusing to him that we had done that Microsoft thing, because of course at that time they were still arch enemies, and I guess they are today.
He came from American Express, right? Lou Gerstner was at Apple before, right? If I remember. Yeah.
He was a longtime management consultant, and he was at I think in CPG, and then he made the move to Amex, and that really cemented his. He was a brilliant marketer there, and that's when he got to know Shelley Lazarus, and they sort of hatched the plot to do the consolidation, which was smart because IBM was spending a lot of money, but it was all diffused. It was all all over the place. Like the same person got 700 different messages, contacts, just by one channel, just by like direct mail. So
there you are. It's funny because you mentioned you hired 100 people. I remember we were struggling getting 30 people in 30 days. How did you compete? Because the war for talent at that time was quite large. Startups, digital agencies. How was it the Ogilvy thing that brought a lot of these people together as well? Do you think?
Well, I think people always have been attracted to coming to work at Ogilvy, but I was hiring very young people who had some experience in technology, or you could tell that they were, moving towards that part of communications and understood, that this was the future. And so, we really, a few of them had some other agency experience at small places, but most of them, just had the guts to want to do it, and they learned it really fast. I mean, remember, it was an emerging area, so there wasn't that much to learn yet.
You didn't have to know a lot. Well, what was the talk? If you can talk about the culture, like what do you remember of just the culture because it was so nascent? You know, what were the people like? What was the office like, especially as you're sort of growing it, you know, while you're driving it?
Well, I mean, one of the first things I did was to introduce someone I'd worked with at another agency who is a lifelong friend and who still works with Ogilvy, is Jan Leth, who was one of the first people in creative to shift from doing traditional creative work to digital creative work. And he was a designer by training in the creative sense, so an art director. So it was more natural for him to start understanding how to use technology for creative purposes. And I think without him, we would have had a much different situation, because he was able to make connections to the traditional creatives at Ogilvy who ruled the roost, for sure. And he was also able to attract a lot of people who, not just creative people who wanted to get into digital, but also project managers and you know, more of the kind of production people that you needed. And so he was my partner really in the whole buildup at Ogilvy, and he became the digital chief creative officer globally. And again, I don't think that I could have done it without him. The vibe of the whole thing was just massive growth. I mean, came in every day and there was new people. You know, I just remember the rush. You know, it was. I'd go home at night and get a few hours of sleep, but you had to get back there and get going every day, and it was like really intense and in a good way. And I think there was a lot of camaraderie, and there was a lot of, we're on the cusp of something really big. Now, we didn't think it was going to take 25 years, which it kind of did, but there were, you know, there was excitement at all points. You know, I remember I met Wenda Millard about 30 years ago when she was.
Oh, wow. There's a name. Gosh.
Yeah. She made the switch from, regular publishing very early, went to DoubleClick.
Yeah.
And with Kevin Ryan. And that was not like something people were not jumping out of traditional publishing and ad sales to go to digital ad sales. And she did. And of course, the rest is history. You know, DoubleClick got acquired by Google, and she went to become chief revenue officer at Yahoo and millions of other things. But, you know, they're like everyone at the time, she was really a traditionalist who was making a change. I mean, it was a little simpler for me because I didn't grow up in brand advertising. I grew up doing data and direct marketing. And so digital was going to be direct marketing on steroids, where, you know, it eventually, like today, we can use so much data to drive such an automated process and a service promise and all these other things that took a long time to get going.
What was the relationship with the traditional agency? You said, you know, they definitely ruled the roost. You know, were you seen as, like, I assume that you were too big an organization to think of as, you know, punks off to the side like agency.com was. We were like the punks off in the corner. But
we used to go after the big agencies.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
What was that relationship like internally with, you know, the old guard as it stood and you coming in trying to do
I mean, my first 3 years at Ogilvy, I was dedicated to IBM, and I worked in the IBM team and around the world, and worked for Steve. And it was like a special, very large, but it was sort of an agency inside of an agency. And I think on the IBM team, we pioneered the whole idea of integrated marketing communication. And at the time, Shelley was starting to push out this whole idea of 360-degree brand stewardship, you know, 360-degree marketing. All those terms were developed by Charlotte Beers and Shelley, and then, you know, people adopted them, but they were our actual strategy. And so at the time, we tried to mimic that on clients like American Express, who had obviously a very big brand need, but they also had a lot of acquisition and a lot of customer management. And so, you know, we were trying to get all of that business together. There were other clients like that, especially in tech, B2B tech. We really did a lot on Cisco, SAP, ultimately Lenovo. I mean, there was just a whole, because we did IBM so well, we won a lot of business in that area. But, after I had been on IBM for 3 years, I was made president of OgilvyOne, which then I had to not just keep driving IBM, which was a big chunk of our business for the digital world, but also create it and get opportunity for all the rest of the clients. And it wasn't straightforward, I mean, again, having Jan as my creative liaison was really important, because he was one of the very few creatives in the digital space that traditional creatives respected. And if you didn't have respect from the creatives, forget it. And, we were a part of a combined company, but OgilvyOne had its own P&L. We went after our own clients. We built, some of them were shared clients, like IBM and Amex and a bunch of them, Nestle. But we also brought in clients because of our innovation and digital, and because we were there. So, Ford was a huge client of WPP and of Ogilvy, but we had to pitch for Ford.com at one point. And I remember going out to Detroit and doing that pitch and winning it. And, it sounds like a dopey little thing, but in that site that we were redoing, we created the first ability for their customers and prospects to go on and spec out the car they wanted and have a personalized estimate, and stuff that of course is advanced way beyond and is commonplace now, but it wasn't commonplace then.
No.
And the bigger the car company, frankly, I think the harder it was to get the changes. But we did that. We did a huge dealer program that had online as the sort of central interface, and our loyalty company still runs that to this day. And so, getting clients like that was, I would say, directly due to the fact that we were able to hone our skills and build talent off of IBM and the experience we had with them. And then we just, sort of took it. And the rest of the world, I mean, Europe and Asia and Latin America to some degree, they followed suit.
Mm-hmm. And Ogilvy was, big. The network was big enough where you could then just replicate some of these things, so you could get those global things going, right, very quickly, I'm assuming.
Yeah. I mean, remember that our model was to work with these large multinational clients who needed a global footprint from their agencies. So there was always a top 20 clients. Most of them were global, or at least heavily multinational. And there was one person who ran those businesses, and pretty quickly it became clear, if they didn't start bringing in the digital team, somebody else like agency.com or whoever was just going to come in and start eating their lunch. So, even with that, I would say there were some uphill battles. I don't think, and partly because of the clients, CPG stayed out of the picture for a really long time.
Right.
I mean, they did stuff, but not very much until much later. And it was very hard to get them to experiment, because in CPG, they didn't have the end consumer as their target. It was, because of the model. And now that's changed entirely because of DTC being one of the most important ways for them to grow. But they didn't feel like that in the 2000s. It was like, oh, okay, if we have to do a search by, we'll do that or whatever. But it wasn't a big deal. But they've caught up.
Yeah, it's amazing, with Bezos stepping down recently, and seeing some of the interviews he gave, some of the big media TV guys were running these interviews of him talking about setting up Amazon, this young, chubby little face. You just go, wow, it was that long ago, 27 years ago. But can you imagine?
Yeah, right? It's crazy.
It's amazing. Crazy.
Well, so let me, one of the things we like to talk about is, what were some projects you did? You sort of built this innovative hub, first within the IBM business and then became OgilvyOne. So you were in the middle of this thing, innovating early. What are some of the projects? You mentioned the Ford one, and I remember that. I remember for years the car companies just had Brochureware, like super sexy but completely useless sites, right? So I think I remember that Ford one, because the minute you saw a site that actually did something, you're like, okay, that's good. So what were some things that you worked on back then that stick in your mind of like, wow, that was incredible that we did that, either innovations or clients that you worked with? What were some of the things you did that were big?
those two that I gave you, the Yahoo example of really innovating in search was something we did early and we did often. And so I was very proud of our search capability, both organic and paid search. And we bought a little company in Oregon called GSI that is still part of Neo. And I got to the point though where I would tell people, look, if you don't do search every day, you cannot be an expert in it. So I am not an expert anymore. I was for about 4 minutes, and then exactly. I now pick up the phone and call the people at GSI or Neo or whatever. And it was true because it was so complex and data driven that you just had to do it every day, and changing. So, but I was very proud to have that as one of our key innovations. And again, you mentioned Ford. Some of the other things that were great to work on. For a long time, we worked with the founder of Ameritrade, which became TD Ameritrade through acquisition. And actually, they bought a couple of other firms along the way. And, we were responsible for all of their, for a long time, for all their acquisition. In fact, we sort of started the direct-to-consumer investment business with the direct trades for a really low cost. So, they started the $5 trade fairly soon. Fidelity followed suit. Yeah. Everybody had to. Schwab, everybody had to. Yeah. But we were the first ones out. And I remember the CEO, Joe Ricketts, called us up, wanted us to be on the air in 30 days with direct TV. we actually did that, and it was. But we tied it to an internet acquisition campaign, and it was a very simple idea. It was, we got into Club Med for $5, or we got into for $5, and
great idea.
It was like $3 billion came in immediately in a couple of weeks, and they were all off to the races. And I do remember it was a highly competitive time period because. The competitors all had to come up with their own response really quickly, or else, people were just going to migrate away from brokers and from, other ways of buying stocks. So everybody could buy stocks all of a sudden. And of course, now you see how it's turned out. It's become, everybody can buy Bitcoin now. Everybody can buy anything. So,
GameStop.
So that business was really built on web-based marketing. And eventually mobile marketing, other things. But one of the things that we did was apply the sophisticated principles of segmentation and direct marketing into, a test and learn environment early on. And now there are even better tools. But at the time, I'd come out of a world where we used to have 600 different manual test cells in a credit card mailing. We had to be able to do that and alter very small things in the creative part of the application, or what the offer was, or just tiny things like colors. And I remember we did a couple of tests of, and we used some automated techniques, some software to be able to manage small changes and read them quickly and make adjustments and optimize. And we really, I think, had one that was about 220 variables. Again, very, very, very small ones. And within a week, you knew, instead of waiting for all the stuff to come in and have data analysts fool around with all that, we had the dashboard, and we knew what was working, and we rolled that out. And so, test and learn has been around forever in direct marketing. Everybody acts like it's, A/B testing is some new thing. It's not new at all. But to be able to do it with the right tools and to be able to automate it was a giant leap forward. And that is part of what we helped to innovate, using internet tools. And so, that was another one, because I felt like it made a huge difference in the outcome of their business. They just sold a lot more and, acquired customers and at a much higher rate and a lower cost. So those are the kind of things that, I kind of loved that we got to work on, because it was sort of in the David Ogilvy tradition of we sell or else, that it wasn't about Brochureware. It was about, how does this experience provide enough information, choice, and engagement to be able to get people to apply for an account, which wasn't that easy, because for a long time because of the back end. The account process might mean you had to like fax it or something, in the early days. Now you don't have to do that anymore, but we lived through it all. We lived through all the barriers, still made it work. And then, it got better as technology got better.
Do you think the, your Ogilvy branding and the capabilities that Ogilvy provided helped you with the conversations with the clients? Because, there were times we would walk into a client and they'd say, wait, you can do what? How would you do that?
Yeah.
You think some of that heritage, because I came from a direct background as well when I joined agency. And it was interesting to echo what you said. You could test these things at scale now. And they would look at you like you were from Mars, right? Do you think the Ogilvy brand helped you with some of those clients?
Sure. I mean, it not only helped because of brand, but because you could link it. We used to always be looking at from the media point of view.
Ah, right. Because
you had all at, creating awareness, getting preference, getting to conversion. And doing that in both a B2B and a B2C environment, actually B2B was harder to demonstrate, but we did. And, the clients like IBM did a tremendous amount of traditional marketing, but they did hear from their clients a lot about, why do you constantly barrage me with stuff that isn't relevant to me? And so I would go to the big marketing meetings at IBM every year, the client global meetings, and there would be, sometimes they would play like telemarketing or call center tapes, or they would have a salesperson come up and say, thanks for doing all the marketing, guys, but you're killing my client, my customer. And so there were some more enlightened, the tighter the relationship between the marketer and the customer because of the business model, the more open they were to really manipulating I think the whole marketing mix and trying to get to a more optimal one. And I think, again, that's why CPG was at the end of the train, because they didn't have a database of their customers. They didn't really know that much about them. And, their customers were the retailers.
Right.
And I think, it does help to have the brand overlay, but then there was a lot of times, I have to say, where people would go, well, you weren't born on the web as Ogilvy, you just make TV spots, so why should we work with you? So there's a flip side to all of it. It was like, I'm going to go work with Razorfish or whatever. And, it just depends. I think all of that is actually changing because everyone has to be, pretty conversant and able to deliver. Certainly digital marketing. It's different when you get into, heavier plumbing. But like, we started our MarTech Center of Excellence in India and bought 3 or 4 companies, put them together. And they're expert in implementing and helping clients get their campaigns on optimized sort of automated platforms, whether it's Adobe or Salesforce or whatever. And they're doing great. They're growing like crazy. And probably half the world doesn't even know that Ogilvy does that. But whenever they find it out, they're quite happy to buy it from us. So,
great. What, one of the things Ritesh and I will sometimes talk about are, there's the big wins, but you're innovating, right? So stuff doesn't always work. Like, are there any nightmares that come to mind of like,
I wish we hadn't done that.
Or, client bid.
I don't know. It could be that I've had plenty of glasses of wine since then, and I've gotten but what I always remember is getting like the phone call from the head producer. I remember once we were supposed to launch. We had gotten a CPG client to do something. And it was a big one, and a big advertising client for Ogilvy too. So it was very bad if anything went wrong. And it was like one of the big cereal brands. And we'd been working on this special, highly creative thing that was for kids to go and do something online. And I remember he called up and said something had failed, I don't know, in the QA process or whatever. And, for about the 50th time, I was going to have to tell the client it wasn't going to launch. And it was that kind of stuff that killed me. I was like, the technologies were still new. I mean, this is like in the early 2000 period, it was still new enough that you couldn't always troubleshoot everything. We didn't have a tech department like R&D at IBM. That's why nobody bought anything that was mission critical from all of us as service providers for a long time, because they didn't buy their ERP system from us or ask us to implement it. But marketing stuff was okay. But again, that changed as e-commerce and other channels became, for some people, absolutely some of their largest channels, and they needed to work all the time. So reputation mattered. But I don't know, that's sort of, I don't think I had an epic fail, but I certainly remember having to explain things a lot.
Yeah, or you've blocked them out. Like mythologized all the successes and the failures. They're just distant memories. So walk us forward now. Like you mentioned, this was sort of around the 2000s. You we're doing this stuff early. One of the things we like to ask is, what did you carry forward from those days? And then you've been on a continuous path, which I think is really fascinating. A lot of people sort of jetted off to completely different, I'm going to run as far away from the internet as I can.
Like Paul last week, for him, right? He's like, I'm done with the internet. Never.
He's making furniture now.
Yeah.
So, what did you carry forward from those early days, and just kind of walk us forward into what you're doing today?
Well, I do think it's very much about constantly experimenting and learning. It's still emerging. Let's face it. Everybody goes, well, what's best practice in this and best practice? And it's especially with things like AI or AR, VR, or the newest ways you can be creative. It is emerging practice. We don't know what the outcomes will always be, but if you don't try some stuff early, I mean, certainly we had plenty of failures, whether it was in ad tech or in other stuff. But if you don't fail early, then you're going to be really late to the party.
Yeah.
And so, we have continuously built up our capabilities and our people. I mentioned the Martech COE that we did. We've done lots of acquisitions around the world to bring more talent in. And, now we just brought, with Andy Main joining us from Deloitte Digital, you don't have to really argue anymore for investment or have this be a bigger part. It's like, this is the future of his plan. And so, but he wants to do it with creativity. And I think that's a big distinction from many other pure plays, because we have that creative reputation. So he's just hired Steve Sektig, who's coming in to run the experience business for us, which is obviously business I ran for a long time. I'm running growth and innovation. We have a new person in PR, and all of these areas are going to have different elements of strategy, of technology, of implementation, of creative technologies, of UX, UI, of being able to set KPIs and measure, govern. All those elements are going to be using influence and corporate reputation kinds of things. So there's no part of our health, obviously, that Ritesh is in. There's no part of our business that isn't going to have deep digital development. And I think I'm really happy that Ritesh was able to, over the last several years, move us in healthcare in particular into a lot of new innovations around chatbots, around Alexa skills, around the AR and VR world, things that are going to become, I think, commonplace, like some of the stuff that was really new 20 years ago. It's going to be commonplace for certainly patients. It's becoming so. You're being driven online to do everything that you do with the health community and the health ecosystem. And so I think that's a place where we have been investing in making sure we get some tests going in the last several years. We do a lot of client education. We do a lot of, trying to bring clients into the fact that behavioral science has to be part of their segmentation. And that's not a digital thing. That's just like, you can't really do marketing properly. You're just trying to act like you can use demographics for all of the way that you do targeting. You can't. So, I think we've brought forward this constant learning, that we're a teaching hospital kind of environment, that we want to bring in new kinds of people, fresh blood, but also keep the veterans like me and Ritesh, we keep pushing all the time, and we've retained a lot of people like Jan, a lot of other people for a long time. But you've got to bring in people who know new things too. So I'm very excited for where we are now, and that we're actually coming back to, I think, a more we've been recognized as a leader in digital by Gartner for every year for the last 5 and from 2017 forward. But I think that having an experienced business that's clear and called out that way is going to help us so to get investment and to bring more things to clients. And I think having our innovation team, I mean, I have a lot of plans for what we're going to do in innovation, and a lot of it is related to the digital transformation that clients are going through.
Yeah. You think there's a thread in listening to you from those early days when you came in, that the network of Ogilvy, but also that thread of we sell or else still continues. From listening to you,
I think it's going to become sort of stronger. I think if you listen to Andy, and I've worked with him on the strategy for the future, the global strategy that he's adopting, all he talks about is growth. It's like his middle name. So, and he doesn't want growth that is sort of soft metrics. He is looking again at what we always tried to do when we said we sell or else was, we want a dashboard that says this works better than that. This created this much value. If you can find more customers like this and convert them, you're going to make this much more money. Your stock price will be affected, blah, blah, blah. I think that's a shift back towards, frankly, what David envisioned and what we've had, going in all parts of the world at different speeds. But I think he's just going to really make it take off like a rocket again, and that thread will be there.
Yeah. Can you talk the retention? I've talked for years, and even relatively recently, that boundary, that shift to digital, it's been a war. And you even mentioned before, it took 25 years. Can you talk about that shift, from maybe we're on the other side of it. We talked, before we hopped on here live that COVID seems to have accelerated some digital adoption stuff. But can you talk about, do you think that there was a definitive time where you thought, digital's being embraced? It's not as much of a war as it used to be?
Yeah. I mean, if I sort of every year looked at all of the big consultancies would put out projections of spending. If you just follow the spending pattern, there was a moment, I think around 2016, where digital spending, just for advertising purposes, digital outran the traditional print, and TV kind of spends, and I don't know if they're counting it all correctly or not. There's still a tremendous amount of television content and television viewership, and television works, but television has totally changed too and become digitalized, and addressable. So now, it's sort of like, what's the difference? There's, I don't really know. Billboards are digitally scanned, personalized to whoever.
We waited them out long enough, and digital subsumed the world, right?
Yeah, but I do think there's something else. I think that the CMO position has become more responsible for outcomes over time, and that more CMOs, there's a generational change. When you get CMOs who have been around using the internet from the time they were kids, now in important positions, and it, that changed a lot of things, because I think the first 5 years of the internet in the 90s, things went really kind of fast. I remember I didn't have to do any new business. I just walked in the door and the phone rang off the hook all the time.
Yep.
Then everybody got kind of, for whatever reason, they got kind of ticked off because they said, well, how do you measure it? And how do you know it's working? And I don't know how many times we said, well, how do you know the TV's working? And you have, that old John Wanamaker thing. And so people spoke out of both sides of their mouth, but they also tended to do what they were comfortable with. And, at a CPG company, you never got fired for making a great television commercial. So, they weren't going to be jumping ship too fast. But then after that sort of glacial speed of 20 years, then I think the last 5 have been quite a bit faster before the pandemic.
Yeah.
And that's because of the generational change in the clients' leadership, and because growth is harder. So when growth gets hard, you have to get demonstrable to the C-suite and the boards, show me that what you're doing is working before I give you any more giant marketing budgets. And things like direct marketing and demand generation and digital actually could be shown to bring in customers at a certain cost and all that. And so I think that helped to get it going again. And then some very, cool new technologies also helped, because remember when we were just doing banners and we were just doing billboards and brochureware and all that? Wasn't that exciting for anybody that used to make Super Bowl commercials, and including the clients for watching them?
That's right.
So now you can do some unbelievable takeovers and, create web events that are much cooler than they used to be. And so, and there's so much streaming content that everybody's used to that now. So I just think that there was, the last 5 years, we saw quite a bit of change. And then the pandemic just completely shot it up like a rocket. I mean, I can't find anything to watch anymore. I've watched so much stuff. Bridgerton 2 is not out yet. Why is
it? Going back to 80s series from the 80s.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Growing up in those times, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think it's nice now because we're all accepted and even, celebrated. But, within Ogilvy, our world is always still about letting the creative lead the way. And this is just more kinds of ways to be creative. So, what's not to like? So I think, it will continue to accelerate.
Yeah.
It's amazing if you mentioned addressable TV, and you're going back to your direct marketing roots. It was always, how do we get somebody to open the envelope, right?
Yeah.
How do we target them with the message for them to open the envelope? Now we've got so many little places we can target people.
Well, how do we get somebody to open an email? How do we get somebody to, respond to anything? So all this, in direct marketing before the internet, you knew that there were 3 major factors. Well, if you were talking about mail, you were talking about the list, and the offer, and the creative.
Yeah.
And by far, the 2 biggest predictors of success were the list or media, the data, and the offer.
That's right.
The creative, we did have a lot of creative packages that won, that beat, whether it was in DRTV or in direct mail or in, even DR print, but where you had an application on a magazine page or something. So you can measure all that. But the biggest factor was, did you get the targeting right? And this is what digital and Google and, all of the different ways that you can, now target better has sort of changed the world. And so, I think that people used to talk about segmentation, and there is a strategic segmentation that most brands and companies need to do to understand, where their white space is and who their design target is and all that. But if you don't carry that down into behavioral data-driven segmentation, you're missing a pretty big bet. And a lot of people didn't pay attention to that for a long time, but now they are. So
it's fascinating.
So here we are, it's 2021. You've carried so much, and it is. I have to say, I remember when I joined agency, it was always, let's go after the big agencies because they don't have a clue. We can pick off their clients right away, right? So, but we could never pick off an Ogilvy client. We never succeeded there for some reason. So now we know why.
Yeah, exactly.
We've proved it. But now we're here. There is some circle that's come around, as you said.
Yeah.
What next? You've pioneered so much and you're doing some great stuff. And what's going on now? Where are you heading?
Well, right now, because we have had a new CEO globally in the last 6 months who has set a new strategy out and changed a little bit of the business structure, the biggest, and so I have responsibility for this growth and innovation business that is really about helping clients in this new world of ecosystems, omnichannel, all of the things that they have to be able to decode. How do we do that with creativity and create the programs that are going to allow them to grow, allow, you know, our people to grow and learn things and make the planet a better place. So it's kind of, we're doing this triple bottom line thing. So I'm personally working really focused right now on an innovation offering that is kind of what's the next step for us in innovation, because we've done all kinds of innovation. We've done brand innovation, we've done digital innovation, we've done business model innovation. We'll keep doing all those things, but how do we do them in a way that's appropriate to the current world environment, which is really different? So, we look at the pandemic for sure. That's sort of a big negative, but maybe there'll be this revolutionary vaccine that changes that and just creates new opportunities somehow. I don't know. You kind of have to look at silver linings someplace. And then there's all the political upheaval, and there's all the cultural upheaval and other things. We're trying to figure out ways to innovate around those world realities and where they're going to drive people, humans in the future. And so it's going to have, certainly a big part of it will be in digital and technology innovation, but it may mean also us doing acquisitions in innovation consultancies, things like that, so that we can up our talent base quickly and bring more value to clients more rapidly. You know, part of our struggle, as you guys know, has been, all the management consultants decided they should get into the services business and
exactly.
In digital, and now in creative, like buying Droga 5 and all. And I'm like, first of all, why do they want to get into this business with much worse margins than they have? I don't. But I think they've kind of run out of ERP and implementations. And so, we do have to face that, and our reaction to it is, and our way of, winning with clients is to say, look, we actually know what customers think and feel and do way better than any management consultant. Yes, they can create a roadmap for you with numbers on it, but like, if you have to talk and interact with customers through your brand and through experience, we're the people to do that. And by the way, we have all the technology understanding that we need to be able to do it in a super modern way. And so that's the role of innovation for us, is to help our clients get to rapid growth and value that can be demonstrated. And I'm excited by that, because I've been at Ogilvy 25 years. I've always been building something new. So we started Ogilvy Entertainment at one point when content was coming around. We certainly relaunched Direct as OgilvyOne and made it a huge digital network. And so, this is sort of the next stage for me, is how can we build this up into a huge new business?
It's funny. It feels a little like it was back in 97, 98 at this moment.
I know.
There's some uncertainty. There's some new stuff. Right?
No, I actually thought that the other day, because the last 2 weeks, coming into 2021, I suddenly started to have these days of like, every single minute is scheduled, and then you go to bed and you get up and do it again. And I was like I said, that's sort of what it felt like back then. Yeah, I have to say it's a little different, because the fear factors are bigger for everybody. The pandemic is frightening, and the way you have to work is harder. I'm really, after 11 months, I'm sick to death of not being able to go in a room with my team, with a whiteboard and do some stuff, and sitting around in my apartment or my house or whatever. And I worry about our people who are, isolated, and especially younger people who, you can tell people are starting to get sick. People are starting, not from COVID, they're starting to just, it's not natural for humans not to be together.
So, the energy is dropping. I
mean, I think the demands are as high as back then. If not higher. But I think our ability right now to deliver on everything has been made more difficult because no matter how many people you hire, you still have to onboard them, doing it far away. You never get to meet them face to face. You have to like figure all this stuff out and do it globally. Thanks a lot. And there's never any downtime because someone's always calling you in the middle of the night or whatever. It's like, so
like your 8 a.m. that you almost did at 8 a.m. this morning.
That was with someone in Dubai, and I just said, listen, I'll talk to you on Saturday if need be, but I will not. And because it was my 58th day in a row of having some giant discussion at 8 o'clock where, that's not that early for me, but for a giant discussion it is. And so I think, we're going to have fun. We need to have more fun. That's difficult in this environment. Whereas back then we were having a hell of a time, we didn't know what we were doing half of the time either, but it was new, so it was okay. And I feel that again. I feel like we could do new stuff again.
I was reminding Kyle that we had Tito Puente come and play at our Christmas party one year, just like, because we could, We
had the Fugees at one.
Wow. You guys were cooler than us. We had Jerry Seinfeld at one.
Oh, there you go.
Bill Gray knew him from the Amex commercials, so that's why he agreed to do it.
Oh, that's great.
That was right after 9/11, where everybody felt sorry for everybody else. But
So, Kyle, we have a question. I'm not sure we can answer it, Carla, but Marianne Powers is asked about the WPP TikTok. TikTok being this brand new thing that's out there. Do we know more about this partnership? Do you have any insight? Because all we know is what we've heard in the press, right?
Yeah, it just got announced. But to be perfectly clear, we have been working with TikTok around Ogilvy, around the world for a while. So in Asia, they have a lot of client programs going on. In New York, we do too. And so I think what happens a lot is that individual companies have partnerships that start, like, we have one with Google, with Facebook, with Instagram, with Snap, whatever. And so they start hearing it from all the different operating companies. They start hearing about TikTok and about how we form partnerships. So, VML's doing one thing and Wonderman's doing something and Ogilvy's doing something and, et cetera. And we have a lot of companies. And when they, at WPP, at the holding company level, there's enough,
momentum
around something new. And obviously it's been in the press a huge amount. Sonia Partalo, who is the EVP for partnerships, who's fantastic. Her job is to go and kind of connect the dots around what could be individual programs that are going on to, okay, well, what if we have a WPP level partnership where we can leverage our combined buying power with them and also bring more ideas to clients and become more famous for doing TikTok. And so it's we have big WPP partnerships with Adobe and with, Google, everybody, but TikTok is now the latest and greatest. And so it's natural that they would do that. I think for our clients and prospects, if people are interested in TikTok, they can go in through their operating company and ask, what can we do? How can we add that to our marketing mix? We've already done that for a lot of clients, or they can also contact WPP. So, it's that's the role of the holding company is to really help enable and enhance whatever we might start to do on one level of scale and then scale it up.
Wow.
But I honestly, I haven't had more time to get into it than that.
Yeah. I'm sure we'll see more, but Kyle.
Yeah, I was just going to say, hopefully this was a little break from your very busy day. We had a good, fun conversation here. Really appreciate you being here. And we all have to get back to our day jobs now. But I just want to thank you. This has been really, really amazing.
Amazing. We can go for another hour.
Yeah, I know we could. It's been great fun, and I don't think I admitted anything too bad, but
no,
about the past.
Yeah.
Well,
we've forgotten most of it, I think, right? Yeah. That's why we're doing this. Try and collect.
The one thing I have to say, the one thing I do miss is being able to throw huge conferences like in Dublin, where everybody came, and in Istanbul, and
yes,
Kyoto. I miss those days.
I know. We'll get back to that. We will.
Yeah. I hope we will. Anyway,
Carla,
thank you so much, Kyle. Thank you, Ritesh.
Thank you so much.
Keep moving.
Thanks.
It was
Take care,
great
guys.
to see you.
Bye.
Bye.